traditional and cultural heritage have continued to evolve, positioning Mongolia as one of the leaders in promoting gender equality in Asia. In its first constitution, Mongolia became the first country in Asia to guarantee equal rights for women, including the rights to vote and to be elected. This year, we celebrate the centennial anniversary of the establishment of the National Organization for Women, the Mongolian Women's Federation. As we approach this historic anniversary, in 2023, we have implemented legal policy reform designed to enhance women participation in both social and political decision-making level. As a result, in the recent parliamentary election, 25.4% of elected members were women, exceeding the average rate of 21.2% in Asia. Moreover, in August this year, our country successfully hosted the World Women's Forum under the theme Towards a Green Future in Ulaanbaatar in collaboration with the United Nations. This forum brought together women leaders and from governments, international organizations, and influential representatives from diverse sectors, social, economic, and cultural, across 5 continents. They proposed numerous creative initiatives to enhance women's role and contributions toward achieving sustainable development goals, including economics, environment, climate change, food security, education, sports, culture, and the arts. I'm pleased to highlight that the Ulaanbaatar Declaration Towards a Sustainable Future was adopted as the forum's outcome document. Building on the momentum of the World Women's Forum, Mongolia will continue to actively promote gender equality and the empowerment of women. Mr. President, distinguished delegates, the General Assembly of the United Nations is the most important and honorable podium for amplifying the voice of ideas and aspirations for international peace and security, well-being, and development of humanity. Mongolia has consistently supported the efforts of member states to reform the UN Security Council into a more equitable, accessible, transparent, effective, democratic, and responsible system. We also strongly advocate for further strengthening the United Nations' central role and coordination in global affairs. Our country believes that any international challenges and misunderstandings should be addressed through mutual understanding, trust, respect, and dialogue, and resolved within the framework of international legal norms. Therefore, I call on you, heads of states, governments, and distinguished delegates, to demonstrate exceptional leadership and make meaningful contributions to strengthen trust, mutual respect, and cooperation among the nations of the world in the crucial pursuit of global peace, security, sustainable development, and the well-being of humanity. May the eternal blue sky bless us with peace throughout the world. Thank you very much for your attention.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of Mongolia. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Wavel Ramkalawan, President of the Republic of Seychelles. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I would like first of all to extend my words of congratulations to Ambassador Yang on your election as President of the General Assembly for this 69th session. I wish also to thank Ambassador Francis for his diligent leadership during the 78th session. Mr. President, as the highest representatives of the peoples of the world, we meet every year in this institution, which promises to deliver peace, progress, and prosperity for all. We must be frank in our assessment of what we are doing for the people that we represent and their interests that we serve. For my people of the Seychelles, we must be critical of our approach to the challenges of today and plan for the challenges of tomorrow. The world is less secure than even just 1 year ago. Where we hoped that existing conflicts could be resolved, we find ourselves in a situation more tense and precarious. Flames stoked by competition and distrust threaten to engulf those who have no part in these conflicts, leaving us gripped by a fearful atmosphere of instability exacerbated by the worry of expanded warfare. We are in danger of losing sight of the values that bring us together, that transcend borders and cultures, that are understood in all languages and present in all ideologies. We must revert to our foundational principles of dialogue and cooperation. Without a stable foundation, we cannot build our vision of a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable world. Our focus is diverted from the challenges requiring our urgent and undivided attention, challenges affecting the core of people's lives and equally requiring solutions with people at their center. The climate crisis, ending poverty and hunger, ensuring that all have the indisputable right to a decent and dignified life. Our people have entrusted us to work together to find solutions. Mr. President, 79 years ago, the permanent members of the Security Council conferred upon themselves the great responsibility of ensuring international peace and security, to cooperate in good faith to save future generations from transgressions of the past. With this great responsibility comes the expectation that gross violations of the UN Charter be dealt with resolutely and impartially. We place our trust in them to act in the common interest, to prevent conflict and preserve human dignity. The consequences of conflict are felt beyond the direct and intolerable suffering of victims in war zones and those displaced by fighting. In such an interconnected world, we are all subjected to inflationary pressures, elevated commodity and energy prices, and other disruptive effects. Widened and prolonged conflict risks affecting smaller states like Seychelles, trying not to get caught in the crossfire. It is not our intention to lecture the world powers, nor attempt to prescribe solutions to complex issues. We simply wish to remind you of your duty and be reassured that geopolitics will not supersede human rights and international law. Since its formation in 1946, the Security Council has remained largely unchanged. Most of Africa was under colonial rule then. Seychelles joins the call for the UN and the Security Council to deliver the reform being appealed for by so many, with the objective not to hinder its work, but to bring inclusivity and perspective. It is time to correct one of the many injustices to which Africa has been subjected. Permanent membership of the world's primary peacekeeping institution is a necessity. The consideration by the Council of critical issues such as sea level rise brought by Malta last year and the broader climate security nexus has proven that it is capable of reflecting new realities. The proposal of the United States to include a rotating seat for small island developing states is a welcome and progressive one. Mr. President, climate change remains the foremost challenge facing humanity, and failure to address its effects will devastate current and future generations. As a small island state, Seychelles understands what it means to be vulnerable, a vulnerability that cannot be ignored in the future we see for ourselves. We are on the front lines of the climate crisis, which poses irreversible threats to our people, our economy, and our way of life. Rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and the degradation of our oceans are stark reminders of the urgent need for global action on climate change. We have all made commitments, pledges, and promises to achieve large-scale reductions of emissions, to keep the goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees, to boost adaptation, to deal with extreme weather disasters, and build resilience to address future impacts. But words are nothing without deeds, and we have to act urgently, in unity, to make the necessary transition to a more sustainable future. It is a choice, conscious and intentional, to continue down this path and decide that business as usual in pursuit of short-term goals is acceptable. Mr. President, world military expenditure has increased for the 10th consecutive year, reaching $2.5 trillion in 2023. This makes even the highest estimates of the funds, $100 billion needed for loss and damage, seem modest and insignificant. This is a worrying reflection of the world's priorities. It is unfair for SIDS to suffer the consequences of these choices. We simply do not have the means to cope with the disastrous effects of climate change. Here I want to thank those who have contributed to the Loss and Damage Fund. The pledges made following COP28 should not be mere attempts to pacify us who have been calling for remediation. We hope to take it as a token of ongoing commitment and continued action given the expected rise in costs of dealing with climate change. As the Secretary General said yesterday, those who shoulder the blame should foot the bill. The international community cannot hope to advance sustainable development when some race ahead while others are left to struggle. No one should be left behind, lest we forsake future generations to a bleaker world. The obligations outlined in the Paris Agreement are the lifelines that give us a chance if all states did their utmost to adhere to them. Our reliance on fossil fuels is unsustainable and detrimental. We must accelerate energy transition towards renewables and mobilize investment in the technology and infrastructure to give us any prospect of real energy security. Seychelles' focus remains on nature-based solutions to combat climate change while ensuring economic sustainability and environmental preservation. Our blue bonds demonstrate the potential to harness capital markets for financing the sustainable use of marine resources. Mr. President, ambitious and innovative strategies of securing long-term economic development are futile without finance that is accessible and sustainable. The average debt to GDP ratio in SIDS exceeds 70%. It is crippling and impedes our development by diverting critical resources away from where they are most needed, in infrastructure, education, and healthcare. Our vulnerabilities have been expounded, yet our borrowing costs remain high. Instead of concessions, we are penalized for our vulnerability. It is time to move beyond discussion and implement real reforms in the international financial system to address the preclusion of some vulnerable countries, regardless of income status, from opportunities to meet development needs. We must also recognize the humanitarian consequences of economic policies. Our work in the multilateral system is undermined by unilateral coercive measures that are intended to leave economies crippled and governments unable to advance dignity for their own people. Mr. President, the multilateral system remains our best hope for addressing the challenges we face. As a small state, Seychelles believes in the United Nations, for we fear of a reality with no alternative. In a world more interconnected than ever, multilateralism is the network that links our shared values to achieve the vision that we have for our world, one that is defined by our common interests and not by our differences. We are here to solve problems, not exacerbate them, to listen and not to dismiss. We put our faith in this institution because we must prove to the world that we can work for it, but it is up to us to make it work. In 2023, we adopted the BBNJ agreement, and this year, Seychelles became the 4th state and the first in Africa to ratify it. We urge other countries to hasten its ratification so as not to delay its entry into force. This year's 4th SIDS conference in Antigua and Barbuda shone a timely light on the challenges that we face in a global economic landscape for which we are ill-equipped to navigate. The Antigua and Barbuda agenda for SIDS provides the blueprint for action over the next decade, and we call on the international community to commit to its implementation. The MVI resolution adopted here last month also represents a triumph of the multilateral system to consider new approaches to complex and evolving issues. Its data and findings deliver the empirical grounding for what we know to be true, that a single-layered approach to development is no longer accurate nor adequate. A better understanding of precisely these multidimensional vulnerabilities will be crucial for the decisions that we take, and more importantly, those taken on our behalf. The Pact for the Future, just adopted, should rightly usher in a new era of engagement based on mutual interest and mutual respect. We must use it to bridge divisions between nations on critical issues of human rights, gender equality, and the rule of law. One that accelerates the implementation of the SDGs and shapes the international financial system more fairly. One that adapts responses to global crisis in a more coordinated way, and one that restores peace with a promise to preserving it in the future. For Seychelles, the Declaration on Future Generations should signal our commitment to safeguarding the rights of all people who will be born by the end of this century, most of whom in developing countries. People who should not be born into hardship. We must envision a world where survival is not a struggle, a world that ensures everyone's rights to prosperity. Basic rights should not be difficult to provide. Mr. President, I firmly believe that these are the foundations on which our cooperation and progress should be built, the things that our people need the most, and what should guide us to building a world that is more secure and sustainable. Let us strive to be the architects of a world where no one is left behind. I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Seychelles. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Peter Pavel, President of the Czech Republic. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a true honor for me to address you today. Much to my regret, since the last time we met here 1 year ago, the world has not become any safer. On the contrary. To start with, let me recall that the United Nations was created to save humanity from the scourge of war and destruction and to promote peace, justice, and better quality of life for all humankind. Together, we have managed to build a global system of rules and cooperation with the ambition to advance security and human rights instead of conflict and suffering. Fostering economic development instead of overlooking mass destruction. Aligned around the UN Charter, we have subscribed not to repeat the mistakes and disasters of the past. Unfortunately, we still do. The world and its citizens need and deserve an effective UN that can respond quickly when needed and deliver better on our shared global commitments. Without a functioning multilateral system, alternative and exclusive structures would lead to more fragmentation and less predictability. It is our duty as national and global leaders to find common solutions to the most pressing problems before they get out of hand. Finding a compromise is never easy. It requires time and patience. Only if we realize that together we can achieve much more than when antagonized, can we make our nations and the United Nations truly united behind common goals. A comprehensive reform of the UN Security Council is long overdue. Making the Council more effective, inclusive, accountable, and better reflecting today's realities by strengthening the voice of underrepresented regions is crucially needed. In the face of unjust and unprovoked Russian war against Ukraine, we must realize that Security Council membership is not a carte blanche. No one has the right to abuse power and bully other members of the international community without sanctions. Together, we must exercise more pressure on Russia to end its unjust and brutal war. The Peace Summit in Switzerland clearly confirmed that peace in Ukraine must be based on international law and principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity. The cynical nature of Russia's policy and its disinterest in genuine peace talks has global consequences. These include impairing nuclear safety, diminishing food and energy security, and damaging rules-based international order. Czechia calls on those who have not yet supported our common effort to evaluate the possibility of signing the joint declaration agreed at the Peace Summit in Switzerland. So far, many with the aspiration to become respected regional or global actors have remained silent. But respect cannot be forced. It can only be earned. Let us not forget that hesitation strengthens the aggressor. If you remain silent to injustice and aggression, soon there will be others waiting in line to see how far they can go in bending international rules as they please. Some of you might think that Russia's actions against Ukraine are just another regional conflict and both sides need to go halfway. But there is no such thing as just a regional conflict. Conflicts in one part of the world cause food insecurity and create refugee waves in others. With globalization, our security and prosperity starts way beyond our own borders. Being fully aware of that, Czechia is committed not only to security of Europe, but also in Middle East, Africa, and elsewhere. I applaud the fact that many nations, including African, spare no effort to achieve and safeguard peace and security in their own regions and far beyond. Czechia will continue to engage with African countries and closely listen to their views and needs. I believe that despite political differences, together we can create mutually beneficial partnerships based on the principle of equality, mutual respect, and without any historical burden or future material demands. Africa is a continent with huge economic potential, which is waiting to be unlocked. We want to see Africa flourish, enhance its capabilities, and create opportunities and jobs for young people. The last topic I want to touch upon is cybersecurity and technology. With progressing digital transformation and our increasing reliance on advanced technology, the gravity and scale of cyber threats are increasing and respect no borders. Cyber espionage and attacks against our hospitals, media, infrastructure, national institutions and businesses aim to destabilize our democratic system and undermine its principles. Just as offline, we cannot allow the cyberspace to become a lawless criminal world. The agreed framework of responsible behavior of states in cyberspace should guide us in our effort to strive for a safer online world. The security of cyberspace will depend on the capacities and effort of all responsible states to enhance their own cyber capabilities. Czechia is taking its commitment to the protection of global cyberspace security very seriously. We will continue providing assistance to our partners in Africa, Asia, and South America so that together we can improve our resilience and to protect our citizens even better. Foreign interference and disinformation continue to present a challenge with a serious impact on democracy, security, and the rules-based international order. With rapid development of new technologies, protection and promotion of human rights continue to be vital for our societies. Emerging technologies will have an undisputable influence on the nature of our future conflicts, but also on peace. It is our duty to ensure that innovations, including artificial intelligence, autonomous systems, biotech, or quantum computing, fully conform to our ethical and human rights standards. Last year, Czechia, together with Mexico, the Maldives, the Netherlands, and South Africa, submitted a resolution on human rights in the context of digital technologies. Furthermore, last month, during the GlobeSec Security Forum, I sat down with top managers of global tech companies at the Prague Geotech Summit. I was glad to hear that they are fully aware of their responsibility and fully committed to contribute to the resilience of democracy. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, the challenges we are facing are global, and we can only succeed if we fully commit ourselves to collective action and more cooperation. The quality of our governance will be judged by our actions and whether we leave this world in a better condition for future generations. I would like to thank everyone who is tirelessly working to make our planet a safer and more secure place for all. That is what really matters. Thank you for your attention.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Czech Republic. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Thank you very much. Dear leaders, Your Excellencies, today I want to tell you about a day that has already passed and a day that must never come. On the night of March 4th, 2022, I received one of the most terrifying reports since the beginning of a full-scale Russian invasion against Ukraine. The report was about Russian tanks firing directly at the buildings of our Ukrainian nuclear power plant, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the largest one in Europe, 6 nuclear reactors. The Russian army stormed this facility just as brutally as any other during this war, without thinking about the consequences, possibly disastrous. This was one of the most horrifying moments of the war, when no one could know how Russian strikes on the nuclear facility would end, and everyone in Ukraine was reminded of what Chernobyl means. Now, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant remains occupied by Russian forces, unfortunately, and it's at risk of a nuclear incident. This is the major source of radiation danger in Europe, possibly in the world. That's why in the peace formula I presented, the first point is about nuclear safety. In Ukraine, we know exactly what we are dealing with. And I want to thank you, the General Assembly members, for adopting a resolution in July this year on the safety of nuclear facilities in Ukraine. Most in the world understand what's at stake. The General Assembly demanded that Russia return control of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant to Ukraine. Only then real nuclear security will return to Europe and the world. And now about the day that must never come. Since Russia can't defeat our people's resistance on the battlefield, Putin is looking for other ways to break the Ukrainian spirit. One of his methods is targeting our energy infrastructure. And these are deliberate Russian attacks on our power plants and the entire energy grid. As of today, Russia has destroyed all our thermal power plants and a large part of our hydroelectric capacity. This is how Putin is preparing for winter, hoping to torment millions of Ukrainians, ordinary families, women, children, ordinary towns, ordinary villages. Putin wants to leave them in the dark and cold this winter, forcing Ukraine to suffer and surrender. Just imagine, please, your country with 80% of its energy system gone, with such a destroyed part of the system. What kind of life would that be? Recently, I received yet another alarming report from our intelligence. Now Putin does seem to be planning attacks on our nuclear power plants and their infrastructure, aiming to disconnect the plants from the power grid. With the help of satellites, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, satellites of other countries. Russia is getting images and detailed information about the infrastructure of our nuclear power plants. But what does this really threaten? Any missile or drone strike, any critical incident in the energy system could lead to a nuclear disaster. A day like that must never come. And Moscow needs to understand this, and this depends in part on your determination to put pressure on the aggressor. These are nuclear power plants. They must be safe. Ladies and gentlemen, 2 years ago, in the fall of 2022, I proposed a comprehensive strategy to end the war and to ensure security, and I presented the peace formula at a highly inclusive political platform for world leaders, the G20 summit in Indonesia, representing billions of citizens from all parts of the globe. And it's important for us that all these people can understand us, understand that Ukraine wants to end this war more than anyone in the world. War always poses a threat to many. You all see in the media and read in reports what is happening in Ukraine because of Russia's war. It's something many are imagining happening to themselves. And yes, the smoke from fires in war-torn cities can reach other countries. And if, God forbid, Russia causes a nuclear disaster at one of our nuclear power plants, radiation will not respect state borders. And unfortunately, various nations could feel the devastating effects. Many are concerned, but the deepest understanding of war is always found in the home it destroys. It's the Ukrainian people who feel the full pain of this war. It's Ukrainian children who are learning to distinguish the sounds of different types of artillery and drones because of Russia's war. It's our people who are forcefully separated by occupation because Putin decided he could do whatever he wants. It's our heroic soldiers who are giving their lives to defend our country from invaders trying to steal our land. That's why we say, rightfully so, there can be no just peace without Ukraine. And I thank every leader, every country that supports us in this, that understands us, that sees how Russia, a country more than 20 times larger than Ukraine in territory, still wants even more land, which is insane, and is seizing it day by day while wanting to destroy its neighbor. And Russia found very special bodies for that: North Korea and Iran, telling choice of friends. And now every neighbor of Russia in Europe and Central Asia feels that the war could come to them as well, and just think what kind of losses that would mean for the world. And I thank nearly 100 nations and international organizations that have supported the peace formula. It's truly a global community: Africa, Asia, Europe, Latin America, North America, the Pacific region, all united by the peace formula. And I am glad that the first peace summit was so reminding of the UN General Assembly. Everyone was equal. All nations that participated in the peace summit, large and small, no veto right, no blocking authority, those that have been independent for ages and those that have only recently gained independence, those that have gone through wars themselves, and those accustomed to peace, all were equal. That is what Russia hates the most and cannot control. That's why Russia says the peace formula doesn't suit it. Here at the UN, I've already met with leaders from India, Guatemala, Japan and Italy, Turkey and Finland, Canada, Paraguay, Slovenia, Germany and others, and my meetings will continue. These are different, absolutely, parts of the world and various political waves of life, but they share the same understanding. Peace is needed, and it must be a real, just peace. Unfortunately, at the UN, it's impossible to truly and fairly resolve matters of war and peace, because too much depends in the Security Council on the veto power. When the aggressor exercises veto power, the UN is powerless to stop the war, but the peace formula can. Once again, there is no veto power in it. That's why it's the best opportunity for peace. Everyone is equal, and it's effective and comprehensive. When some propose alternatives, half-hearted settlement plans, so-called sets of principles, it not only ignores the interests and suffering of Ukrainians, who are affected by the war the most, it not only ignores reality, but also gives Putin the political space to continue the war and pressure the world to bring more nations under control. Any parallel or alternative attempts to seek peace are, in fact, efforts to achieve a lull instead of an end to the war. As a global initiative, the peace formula has already existed for 2 years, and maybe somebody wants a Nobel Prize for their political biography for frozen truths instead of real peace, but the only prizes Putin will give you in return are more suffering and disasters. We must restore nuclear safety. Energy must stop being used as a weapon. We must ensure food security. We need to bring home all our captured soldiers and civilians forcibly deported to Russia. We must uphold the UN Charter and guarantee our right, Ukraine's right to territorial integrity and sovereignty, just as we do for any other nation. We need to withdraw the Russian occupiers, which will bring an end to the hostilities in Ukraine, and we must hold those responsible for war crimes accountable. We need to prevent ecocide and stop the destruction of nature caused by the war. And we must not allow a second or third phase of this Russian invasion. And we need to make it clear the war is over. This is the peace formula. What part of this could be unacceptable to anyone who upholds the UN Charter? If someone in the world seeks alternatives to any of these points or tries to ignore any of them, it likely means they themselves want to do a part of what Putin is doing. The point they ignore reveals the desire they're hiding. And when the Chinese-Brazilian duo tries to grow into a choir of voices, with someone in Europe, with someone in Africa saying something alternative to a full and just peace, the question arises, what is the true interest? Everyone must understand you will not boost your power at Ukraine's expense. And the world has already been through colonial wars and conspiracies of great powers at the expense of those who are smaller. Every country, including China, Brazil, European nations, African nations, Middle East, all understand why this must remain in the past. And Ukrainians will never accept why anyone in the world believes that such a brutal colonial past, which suits no one today, can be imposed on Ukraine now instead of a normal, peaceful life. I want peace for my people, real peace and just peace. And I'm asking for your support from all nations of the world. We do not divide the world. I ask the same of you, do not divide the world. Be united nations. And that will bring us peace. Thank you. Slava Ukraini.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of Ukraine. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, President of the Republic of Ghana. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I cannot help but reflect on the significance of this moment, as this will be my final opportunity to address the United Nations General Assembly as I enter the closing months of my presidency. Over the past 8 years, I've had the privilege of speaking on several variations of the essential themes that quite properly dominate the deliberations of this global assembly: the condition of humanity and the state of the planet. Serving the people of Ghana, and by extension those of West Africa, Africa, and the world, has truly been the greatest blessing of my life. Indeed, being here this morning fills me with both pride and humility. Pride in the limited progress we have made together as nations, and humility in recognizing the challenges that still remain. My time as president has been deeply fulfilling, and I'm profoundly grateful for the trust placed in me by my fellow Ghanaians. It has been an honor to serve them and to contribute to advancing peace, security, and development on the global stage. Mr. President, Madam President, I'm here with a heart full of hope, yet mindful of the great challenges that still confront us. As President of the Republic of Ghana and as a citizen of the world, I'm acutely aware of the shared responsibility we carry. Our work here is nothing less than shaping the future of humanity, a future that will affect generations long after we are gone. Leaving no one behind, acting together for the advancement of peace, sustainable development, and human dignity for present and future generations, reminds us that the decisions we take here will define whether we rise to meet the hopes of billions or continue to let inequalities and injustice persist. We owe it to those who look to this body for leadership to act and not just to talk. The world we live in today is a stark, unfortunate contrast of privilege and hardship. For too long, the voices of those marginalized, those left behind, have been drowned out. They constitute the bulk of humanity. These are the voices of the poor, the displaced, the vulnerable. We cannot, in good conscience, leave them behind. They should be at the center of our discussions and our decisions. Africa, in particular, knows the cost of being left out. Yes, we're a continent rich in potential and resilient in the face of adversity, but we have also been disadvantaged by a global system that has generally treated us as an afterthought. We've been viewed merely as passive recipients of aid rather than as equal partners in global progress. The well-meaning promises of assistance have failed to materialize to bring about the long-term change we so passionately need. Such aid as is offered often comes with strings attached, limiting our ability to shape our own futures. Africa is not a continent of despair. She's full of great possibilities. She's required, however, to chart a new course of development. Our young population is filled with energy, creativity, and ambition. The people of Africa are not asking for handouts. They're demanding opportunities in a new global architecture so they can have access to education, healthcare, and jobs to be able to build better lives for themselves, their families, and their descendants. In Ghana, we've taken bold and decisive steps to ensure that no one is left behind in our national development, and we have shown that it is possible. Our flagship free senior high school policy has benefited 5.7 million young people, many of whom would have been denied the opportunity to learn, to dream, and to succeed. This initiative has transformed the lives of millions, positioning the next generation of Ghanaians to take their place as leaders in the global economy. But this is just the beginning. We need a global commitment to ensure that every child, no matter where they are born, has access to quality education. A world where children are left unprepared for the challenges ahead is not a just world. Beyond education, we've also prioritized health care for our people. Through Agenda 111, my government has embarked on the largest ever healthcare infrastructure project in Ghana's history. This initiative is constructing 111 hospitals across the country, ensuring that even the most remote regions have access to modern healthcare facilities. This is part of our broader goal of ensuring that no one in Ghana is left without the basic right to health. We've also taken significant steps to boost food security and economic growth through the Program for Planting for Food and Jobs. This initiative has improved food production, created jobs, and enhanced incomes for millions of Ghanaians. It is a clear demonstration that with the right policies and investments, we can transform our agricultural sector and ensure that no one goes hungry. In the same vein, our one district, one factory policy is transforming the industrial landscape of the nation, generating the structural transformation of our economy, which is our major strategic objective. And in addition, Ghana has embraced in full the teachings of the Fourth Industrial Revolution and is actively pursuing an agenda of digitalization. Under my administration, we've revolutionized public service delivery by integrating technology into governance. From the introduction of the Ghana Card, which has streamlined identification and access to services, to the digitalization of the country's land registry, these reforms have enhanced transparency, efficiency, and accountability. Digitalization has improved the lives of ordinary Ghanaians and has also laid the groundwork for sustainable economic growth in the digital age. And let us not forget the strides we have made in enhancing the rule of law and governance. Through reforms in the judicial system, strengthening our democratic institutions, and promoting transparency, Ghana continues to be a beacon of good governance in Africa. We have enacted laws and implemented policies that uphold the principles of accountability and ensure that every Ghanaian, regardless of their background, is protected by the rule of law. Madam President, it is impossible to address the challenges of today without speaking of the contradictions that exist within this global institution. We gather here to discuss peace, but wars continue to ravage nations. We speak of justice, yet justice endures. Take the Russian invasion of Ukraine, for instance. Millions of lives have been uprooted. Thousands have lost their lives, and yet the Security Council has struggled to respond decisively, just as it is struggling to make a decisive intervention in the tragic ongoing war in Gaza and the Lebanon. The structure of the Council reflects a world that no longer exists, and its failure to act in times of crisis raises a difficult question. What is the purpose of the Security Council if it cannot intervene when the world needs it most? Reforming the UN Security Council is a matter of fairness and necessity. The current structure, created in 1945, no longer reflects the realities of today's geopolitical and economic landscape. Africa, Latin America, and South Asia remain underrepresented despite their significant influence on global affairs. This lack of representation undermines the legitimacy of the Council's decisions, and the use of veto power by a few permanent members often paralyzes its ability to act effectively during crises. Reform is essential to ensure that the Council is more inclusive, democratic, and responsive to the complex challenges we face today. The world has changed, and the Security Council must change with it to maintain its relevance in promoting global peace and security. For years, I've championed the need to reform the Security Council as per the Ezulwini Consensus, the Common African Position on UN Reform, which calls for Africa to have permanent seats on the Council. It is incomprehensible that a continent of 1.4 billion people has no permanent voice in shaping decisions that affect global peace and security. The time for half measures is over. We need a Security Council that is fit for purpose in today's world. It is heartening, however, that finally the demand for reform has found acceptance by leaders of 2 of the 5 permanent members, President Joe Biden of the United States of America and President Emmanuel Macron of France. Hopefully, the others will soon follow suit. We must also recognize that the fight for peace goes beyond government actions. It is a fight for humanity itself. In Africa, we have often borne the brunt of conflicts, sending our troops to peacekeeping missions with limited support from the global community. While I'm pleased to see the UN now taking steps to finance peacekeeping in Africa, an outcome of Ghana's presidency of the UN Security Council, we must go further. Peacekeeping alone is not enough. We must address the potential causes of conflict, poverty, inequality, and lack of opportunity. True peace comes from investing in education, healthcare, and economic development. However, peace cannot be imposed from the outside. It must be built from within. African nations must take ownership of their security, and the African Union needs to strengthen itself to be able to respond swiftly to threats. Madam President, as I speak today, ongoing developments in West Africa are deeply troubling. Military coups in Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and Niger threaten the democratic progress we have worked so hard to achieve within the ECOWAS community. These coups are stark reminders that democracy is indeed fragile and must be continually nurtured. In Ghana, however, we will remain resolute in our commitment to democracy. As my presidency draws to a close, I want to assure this Assembly that the upcoming 2024 elections in Ghana will be free, fair, and transparent. Ghanaians have demonstrated time and again in the last 3 decades their strong attachment to democracy, which they will not permit to be undermined. The Electoral Commission, supported by Ghana's security services, is well equipped to ensure that the will of the Ghanaian people is respected. Ghana has long been a beacon of democracy in Africa, and we intend to keep it that way. The 2024 elections will be proof of our enduring adherence to the rule of law, transparency, and the principles of democratic accountability that have guided our nation in recent decades. Madam President, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment in history. The decisions we make today will shape the future of our world. We can choose to act with courage, compassion, and a commitment to leave no one behind, or we can choose inaction and allow the suffering of millions and the degradation of the planet to continue. Let me end by reminding us all that the future is not something that simply happens. It is something we create. We have the power in this room to change the course of history. Let us not shy away from that responsibility. Let us act now, and let us act together. I wish you God's blessings in all your current and future deliberations, and I thank you for your attention.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Ghana. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Rumen Radev, President of the Republic of Bulgaria. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me at the outset to congratulate His Excellency Philemon Yang for his elections as the President of the 79th UN General Assembly session. I believe that under his leadership and through his vision, the international community will move forward on the agenda of strengthening the values of the UN Charter, an effort that the humanity now needs the most. Our world faces a range of complex problems, from the unprecedented challenges to the global peace and security, to the escalating climate crisis and the persistent inequalities. We are confronted with a complex array of issues that require our immediate attention and concerted effort. We need to light the spark that ignites change. With this in mind, my country approaches the 79th session of the UN General Assembly with renewed determination to promote multilateral and workable solutions achieved through negotiations and based on the UN Charter. We must follow the path for the sake of the survival of humankind and the future generations. Taking this into consideration, we praise the Pact of the Future as a move towards a vital transformation. It becomes increasingly clear that our success hinges on a firm commitment to upholding multilateralism and the respect for international law, which are the cornerstones of our global order. This order that has been forged in UN by you and your predecessors is now under severe threat. Bulgaria has been always committed to the values of multilateralism and will continue to be, using the accumulated experience from the successful Bulgarian presidency of the UN Economic and Social Council and our current mandate as a constructive member of the Human Rights Council. Excellencies, in 2015, all UN member states adopted with unanimity 17 Sustainable Development Goals, providing a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for the whole planet. Nowadays, they remain more than ever topical and requiring full mobilization of international efforts. However, we must admit that the sheer deterioration of the international peace and security environment in the last years is threatening the fulfillment of our Sustainable Development Agenda, undermining the rules-based international order. Restoring and preserving the peace must not be seen but as the ultimate goal of the international community and is a basic prerequisite for the SDGs fulfillment. It has been 2.5 years since the Russian Federation unleashed a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. From the very beginning, Bulgaria strongly condemns this war, which led to hundreds of thousands of victims, enormous suffering, and destruction. Every single day of this war increases the risk of escalation in intensity and geographical scope, posing a substantial threat to the global peace and security. The side effects of the war are already gravely affecting the economies and social systems of many countries worldwide. That is why the international community should seek ways that lead to de-escalation and dialogue. We should support every diplomatic effort that pursues comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in Ukraine, in conformity with the United Nations Charter and the international law. Since the last year UN General Debate, we have witnessed a significant increase in instability across the Middle East. The conflict between Israel and Hamas after the Hamas brutal attack on Israel triggered a major deterioration of the security in the region with global projections. We must not forget the consequences which followed: tens of thousands dead and injured civilians in Gaza, the total destruction of vital infrastructure, and mass displacement of people. We call for immediate ceasefire, free access of humanitarian convoys, as well as release of all hostages held by Hamas. We are also deeply concerned about the recent development in Lebanon, bringing a qualitative, new and dangerous dimension in the conflict and increasing the risk of its regional enlargement. We call for refraining from use of force, for wisdom and de-escalation. The spiral of violence and the human suffering must come to an end. The only way to achieve sustainable and lasting peace in this region with its very fragile security landscape is the two-state solution. Amid the ongoing destabilization around different regions, the collective global goal for a world without nuclear threat remains more critical than ever. In line with the new agenda for peace, Bulgaria will maintain its commitment to uphold, protect, and strengthen the multilateral framework for disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control. We remain dedicated to the universalization and full implementation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, recognizing it as the cornerstone of the global nuclear non-proliferation regime, which serves as the essential foundation for pursuing nuclear disarmament and plays a crucial role in the development of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. As we address these challenges, prioritizing regional stability becomes vital. My country actively engages in political dialogue with Southeast European countries, driven by the conviction that the region's security, stability, and prosperity are crucial for the broader regional and international resilience. Bulgaria is a strong supporter of the European path of the Western Balkan countries. Our main priorities vis-à-vis the region are fostering good neighborliness, improving connectivity, protection of human rights, and combating ethnic discrimination. However, a serious challenge on this path are the new outbursts of incitements of hatred. Fighting and curbing the aggressive nationalistic rhetoric all over the region and concentrating on positive agenda on strengthening multi-ethnic societies and the rights of the constituent communities will prevent the evocation of the reminiscence of the troubled past of the region. Ladies and gentlemen, progress on achieving the Sustainable Development Goals is the greatest investment for the benefit of the present and future generations. Bulgaria keeps on contributing actively to this common effort through the steady implementation of the National Development Program Bulgarian 2030 and of sustainable projects for development cooperation with partner countries, through supporting projects in education, healthcare, public infrastructure and services, as well as renewable energy solutions. We face a growing number of places around the world where warring dynamics in terms of governance, democracy, and human rights emerge. As a present member of the Human Rights Council, we reaffirm our commitment to this noble cause. Bulgaria has never looked the other way, and this speaks up through our domestic policies, our membership in the Human Rights Council, our work as a co-chair of the Group of Friends of Children and Sustainable Development Goals, Vice President of UNICEF Bureau, member of the Executive Board of UN Women, and through our support for initiatives that empower the General Assembly and aim at accountability. Our advocacy for meaningful participation of civil society, youth, and women in decision-making process across the United Nations system and domestically have already yielded results, and our youth delegate program inspires more young people to choose the path of active citizens. Bulgaria advocates for a human rights-based approach to sustainable development and looks forward to the inclusion of all stakeholders at the upcoming World Social Summit. Excellencies, we have focused on the peace among nations but it is equally important to reconcile with the nature. Climate change is a threat multiplier for the implementation of all Sustainable Development Goals. We urge enhanced action based on the global stocktake, more ambitious climate objectives, including the new finance goal at the 29th session of the United Nations Climate Change Conference. Earlier this year, Bulgaria hosted the 61st session of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which gave impetus to the panel's 7th assessment cycle, including the production of the special report on climate change and cities. Through various panel events, we were able to invigorate the science and science discussion, paying due attention to the climate risks in the Black Sea region, as well as to the urban environment, the role of cities, and the need to adapt to changing climate. Another challenge that brings a lot of opportunities as well is the need for an effective digital governance based on a multi-stakeholder and inclusive approach, aiming for a human-centric digital transformation and a safe and open digital future. In light of growing challenges to the principles of international law and the rules-based order established by the United Nations Charter, Bulgaria remains committed to strengthening the effectiveness and accountability of the United Nations Security Council. We support efforts to enhance transparency and accountability within this body, co-sponsoring the key UN General Assembly resolution on veto use. Bulgaria emphasizes the need for greater effectiveness and prioritizes securing an additional non-permanent seat for the group of Eastern European states in a reformed council. Ladies and gentlemen, let us reaffirm our commitment to addressing these global challenges with firmness and determination. The action we take today will define the future, and with courage and unity, we will rise to meet the opportunities that lie ahead. Thank you for your attention.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Bulgaria. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Chandri Kapesad Santoki, President of the Republic of Suriname. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Madam President, Excellencies, Heads of Delegations, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Madam President, this General Assembly is of historic significance as we embark on a process of recalibrating international relations and establishing a more effective multilateral framework. I therefore extend my heartfelt congratulations to the President on his election to preside over this esteemed body, and allow me to congratulate the outgoing Chair of Trinidad and Tobago on a job well done under difficult circumstances. Madam President, this organization was founded after two devastating world wars. Its original purpose remains relevant today to save current and future generations from the disastrous consequences of wars and armed conflicts and foster peace and political stability for sustained prosperity for all. We, however, observe instead that the world is marked by a complex political and security crisis, weakening our global multilateral framework of collective solidarity, international law, and respect for humanitarian law. The conflicts that divide us are not isolated incidents, they are symptoms of deeper systemic challenges, rising inequality, environmental degradation, and breakdown of global trust. The time has come to dare to make bold decisions, revisit our global governance architecture, and to recommit to the original goals of the United Nations. Madam President, with statistics showing that countries are off track on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, while projections estimate that almost 600 million people will continue to live in extreme poverty in 2030, that is incumbent on us to close the gap between aspiration and financing. I wish to emphasize the urgent need for accelerated reforms and coordination within the international financial architecture, especially the international financial institutions. The Multidimensional Vulnerability Index, MVI, offers a comprehensive and inclusive framework that goes beyond traditional metrics to capture the true complexity of the vulnerabilities of small islands developing and low-lying coastal states. We urge that the MVI is embedded in the operations of the international financial institutions, especially the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Apart from the MVI, we see other financial obstacles in place that have a major negative impact on our ability to generate development, especially de-risking measures of international banks, which are based on general assessments, do not consider the country's reality and the severe impact on development objectives of the country. This must be addressed head-on if we want to be inclusive rather than exclusive. My country, Suriname, can attest to the importance of urgent need to reform the global financial and political system and to build greater trust in the multilateral system. Because of our ranking, we are not eligible for several global financial instruments to the detriment of my people. Since taking office in July 2020, my government has successfully started a policy of financial economic reforms, including restructuring the debt portfolio supported by an IMF program and international financial institutions. The impact of the various crises and national efforts to reform the economy has not been easy for the population, but we are on the road to recovery now. Macroeconomic stability has been achieved. We established a social safety net and increased several social benefits, all meant to make sure that we did not forget or excluded that part of our population from restoring a healthier economy. Madam President, 2024 statistics reveal that progress in the area of climate action is inadequate, with global greenhouse gas emissions still rising, despite the need for reductions. Climate action can no longer be postponed nor ignored. Soon, we'll meet in Azerbaijan for COP29. Madam President, will we be repeating ourselves with empty promises and pledges, or will we take decisive action to save this planet from extinction? Madam President, Suriname is committed to the Paris Agreement. Suriname has also submitted ambitious nationally determined contributions and has recently started the process of carbon credit trading. Suriname aims to remain a carbon negative country with a high level of biodiversity and more than 90% forest coverage. With this conscious choice to limit deforestation, we sacrifice economic development for our people. For this, Madam President, we are not compensated while everyone benefits from our decision. Carbon negative and carbon neutral countries must be supported for maintaining that status. We are in favor of a just transition to a carbon-less economy for the coming decades, but we also expect to be allowed to develop our natural resources in an environmentally friendly and balanced manner in compliance with the international standards and practices. In fact, we have already embarked in such a development path by introducing more renewables to our energy grid, utilizing technological innovations to reduce our carbon footprint even further. Madam President, Suriname has had, over the past 100 years, industrial development of bauxite industry, onshore oil production, gold production, as well as agriculture production and other industries. And despite these activities, Suriname is among the 3 carbon negative countries in the world. At the same time, Suriname is among the 7 most vulnerable countries with respect to the effects of rising sea levels. Madam President, not only have the international pledges for climate financing not materialized in the way pledged, but access to the available resources is an enormous challenge. Simplification of the application and appraisal procedures must be put in place to have the required impact at local level. Regretfully, we also observe that a large part of these funds finds their way in time-consuming and expensive studies, consultancies, and advisory services. In the meantime, the situation on the ground in the affected regions and countries is deteriorating. Often, the requested assistance comes too late. Madam President, to transform the well-being of our communities, we must embrace diversity and work towards social justice and inclusion. That is what responsible leaders do, making sure no one is left out or excluded. We must practice what we preach. Madam President, while the humanitarian and security situation in the Republic of Haiti remains of concern, we are pleased to note also through leadership of the Caribbean community, a roadmap towards free and fair elections has been initiated and a transition government with a clear mandate has been installed. We cannot leave Haiti and its people alone and behind. Haiti fatigue is not an option. We urge the international community to financially and technically support Haiti on its path forward. Suriname will contribute to the MSS with security personnel and remains committed to assist in whatever way we can. We urge and call for a more effective, coordinated, and coherent approach and the transparent sharing of information regarding the different initiatives to serve more effectively the objectives of facilitating peace, security, and prosperity in Haiti and the Haitian people. Madam President, leaving no one behind should also include lifting the long-standing economic embargo against Cuba and its people. Adopting the Pact of the Future represents an opportunity to redirect a new path for humanity to address current challenges while laying the groundwork for sustainable solutions. We need to foster collaboration and strengthen partnership to address the long-term global issues as climate change, social inequality, and access to affordable health care and quality education for all. Small nations need the support for digital transformation, providing the tools and capacity building initiatives needed to fully integrate into the global digital economy. We must, Madam President, utilize technology in a positive and constructive manner to facilitate financial inclusion for all, access to general education and skills training, but also telemedicine and treatment, as well as instant government services. Madam President, 2024 marks the 5th time for me to address the General Assembly. In 2020, I made my maiden address virtually through the optimal use of modern technology. At that time, I remarked that multilateralism came under attack on several occasions. And 4 years onwards, we still have a long way to go. We must work collectively and with a sense of urgency and positive attitudes towards a renewed commitment to a multilateral framework that is more inclusive, more equitable, more accountable, with the ultimate goal to create a better,